Oldham, a once industrial town just outside Manchester, isn't the kind of place most people picture when they think of a major drug empire. But beneath the quiet terraced streets and corner shops, a ruthless county lines operation was moving hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of heroin and cocaine every month. At the center of it all was Mohammed Rahman, a 28-year-old from Chatterton who ran a network known as the MOE line. From the outside, Rahman appeared calm and calculated, but behind encrypted phones and coded texts, he controlled a team of dealers, couriers, and enforcers who kept the drugs flowing and the money moving. His operation didn't just deal in drugs, it dealt in exploitation. Vulnerable people were groomed, threatened, and used to run deliveries and store narcotics in their homes. For months, Greater Manchester Police's serious and organised crime group quietly built their case. Surveillance, digital forensics, and intelligence reports began to expose the structure of the network, layer by layer. And when the time came to strike, officers uncovered £750,000 worth of heroin and cocaine, cash, and weapons, finally bringing one of Oldham's most organised drug rings to an end. In late 2023, detectives from Greater Manchester Police's County Lines team began to notice something strange in Oldham's drug market. A new contact number had started circulating among known users, a number saved in many phones simply as MOE. To the untrained eye, it was nothing more than another dealer's line. But when analysts began to trace its activity, the scale of what it represented became clear. The MOE line wasn't a single dealer operating on the streets. It was an organised, layered network supplying heroin and cocaine across Oldham, Chatterton, and beyond. At its center was Mohammed Rahman, a 28-year-old who had been quietly building influence. Unlike many small-time dealers, Rahman avoided street-level visibility. He worked from the shadows, communicating through encrypted phones, issuing orders via coded text messages, and delegating every practical task to trusted associates. Rahman ran the network like a business. His phone lines advertised offers and availability to users, who would then receive instructions for drop-off points and times. Deliveries were made by runners, often people struggling with addiction or debt, who worked under pressure, knowing failure meant consequences. The gang operated in shifts, ensuring the line stayed open day and night. From his home on Garforth Street, Rahman coordinated shipments and handled large sums of cash. During raids months later, police would find more than £40,000 in cash at his address, along with multiple burner phones linked to the MOE number. Each device held messages advertising heroin and crack cocaine, sent in bulk to hundreds of users at once. Rahman didn't act alone. His inner circle included 4 key figures who helped him manage the operation: Mohammed Rahman, Jason Wakeford, Jamal Ali, and Anwar Ali. Each man played a distinct role. Rahman acted as an enforcer and recruiter. Wakeford managed storage and transport. Jamal Ali coordinated payments and movement, while Anwar Ali kept the supply line running smoothly between Oldham and Manchester. The gang's strategy was built on resilience. If one member was arrested, another could replace him instantly. If one phone was seized, another was already ready to go live. It was a system designed to keep the product moving and the leadership untouchable. But what Rahman and his associates didn't realize was that their very structure, the phones, the messages, and the transport routes, was leaving behind a trail of digital fingerprints. Every car journey, every Wi-Fi connection, every phone call created a web of evidence. By the end of 2023, the serious and organized crime group at GMP had already begun mapping that web. Investigators knew they were dealing with something far bigger than petty street dealing, a county lines operation worth an estimated £750,000 in just 6 months. What began as whispers on the street would soon become Operation MOE, a full-scale investigation to bring down one of Oldham's most sophisticated drug networks. To understand how the MOE line thrived for so long, detectives first had to understand its structure. The gang operated like a company with clearly defined roles, tight communication, and strict internal discipline. Every member knew their job, and more importantly, what would happen if they failed. At the top sat Mohammed Rahman, the architect. He rarely handled drugs directly, preferring to maintain distance. Instead, he issued instructions through short bursts of encrypted communication, switching devices frequently to avoid being traced. From his modest home in Chatterton, he oversaw an operation that supplied heroin and cocaine worth hundreds of thousands of pounds across Greater Manchester. Rahman's closest ally was Mohammed Rahman, just 25 years old, but already known to police for his violent tendencies. Rahman was the network's enforcer, a figure both trusted and feared. He recruited vulnerable people, often those in debt or addiction, promising money or protection. In reality, he trapped them in a cycle of dependency and control. Some were forced to stash drugs in their homes, others were made to deliver them across town. When police eventually raided Rahman's property, they discovered Class A drugs, a stun gun-style weapon, and evidence of coercion involving one of his victims. Then there was Jason Wakeford, a 51-year-old from Stanley Street, responsible for the gang's logistics. Wakeford was the fixer, the one who secured stash houses, moved product between safe locations, and handled vehicles for transport. Officers later found his car fitted with hidden compartments used to conceal drug packages. He was meticulous, making sure routes avoided cameras and hotspots. Jamal Ali, at only 21, managed much of the network's communication and finances. He handled the MOE phone directly, sending bulk messages to users with price lists and delivery times. Detectives later proved he received payments through multiple small transfers to avoid suspicion. Despite his age, he was a vital cog in keeping the operation organized. The oldest of the group, Anwar Ali, 40, acted as a senior distributor. He made sure the product from Manchester suppliers reached Oldham safely, working as the key link between source and street. Together, these men formed a network that combined old-school street, dealing with modern technology. They relied heavily on encrypted messaging, often using temporary phones that were discarded weekly. When one runner was arrested, another was immediately deployed. Their system seemed foolproof, until digital forensics began exposing patterns they couldn't see. Every device connected to a network left behind metadata, timestamps, cell tower data, Wi-Fi traces. When detectives began linking those fragments together, the picture became clear. The MOE network wasn't as invisible as its members believed. Their obsession with control had created a digital trail so strong that, once discovered, it tied them directly to their crimes. By early 2024, investigators had enough intelligence to move from observation to infiltration. And from that moment on, every message, meeting, and move the gang made was being watched. By the start of 2024, Greater Manchester Police's Serious and Organised Crime Group had pieced together enough intelligence to expose the full scale of the MOE line. What had begun as routine community reports of increased drug activity and missing young people had evolved into a major county lines investigation, one that demanded precision, patience, and coordination. The operation was given the name Operation MOE after the drug line itself. Detectives from the county lines and challenger teams began cross-referencing reports from multiple boroughs, identifying links between small seizures, missing person cases, and financial movements. Surveillance teams quietly tracked vehicles and suspects, logging their movements between Chatterton, Oldham, and Manchester city centre. A major turning point came when officers intercepted one of the gang's runners during a routine traffic stop. Hidden inside the car were multiple wraps of heroin and crack cocaine, as well as a cheap mobile phone that turned out to be linked directly to the MOE contact number. Digital forensics confirmed that the device had received instructions from Rahman's network. That discovery became the backbone of the case. From there, analysts mapped the digital ecosystem, identifying patterns of messaging, overlapping cell tower locations, and Wi-Fi connections shared by multiple phones. It was digital breadcrumbs like these that allowed investigators to build a picture of who was behind each device and how each part of the operation connected. But GMP didn't just rely on data, they built a human picture too. Outreach teams had been reporting vulnerable people who said they were being threatened into letting others use their homes, a practice known as cuckooing. Some residents described being too scared to call police. Others were found locked in their own bedrooms. This intelligence confirmed what detectives already suspected. The MOE gang wasn't just trafficking drugs, it was exploiting people. Working with local safeguarding services, GMP built victim profiles that strengthened the case. Each account added weight to the growing evidence of organized coercion and control. Once enough data, statements, and surveillance hours were collected, detectives presented their findings to the Crown Prosecution Service. The picture that emerged was clear. This wasn't a loose group of dealers, it was a business, structured, deliberate, and managed by Rahman like a CEO. By the time arrest warrants were signed, police had mapped the gang's entire hierarchy, from the top man to the lowest level runner. Over 6 months, they had monitored thousands of calls and tracked cash deposits worth more than £40,000, as well as £750,000 worth of heroin and cocaine moving through Oldham. The stage was set for a coordinated strike. The next step would be the raids. Multiple addresses, simultaneous entries, and one objective: to bring down the MOE line for good. It was still dark on the morning of May 22, 2024, when officers from Greater Manchester Police's Serious and Organised Crime Group assembled in convoy. After months of surveillance, intercepted communications, and quiet preparation, the team was ready to strike. The operation had been mapped out with military precision, multiple entry teams, each targeting a key address across Oldham, Chatterton, and nearby boroughs. At exactly 5:30 a.m., the command came through. Go, go, go. Officers smashed through doors almost simultaneously. One team hit Garforth Street, where ringleader Mohammed Rahman was staying. Another targeted Stanley Street, home to Jason Wakeford, while others stormed flats linked to Mohammed Rahman, Jamal Ali, and Anwar Ali. The raids were fast and decisive. Inside Rahman's home, police found stacks of cash, totaling over £40,000, multiple burner phones, and notepads detailing drug weights and customer debts. The phones, later examined by digital forensics officers, contained thousands of bulk messages advertising white and brown available, coded references to cocaine and heroin. The contacts on those phones directly matched users already known to police. At Wakeford's property, officers discovered wraps of heroin and cocaine, along with scales, packaging, and a vehicle fitted with hidden compartments designed to move product around undetected. Wakeford, 51, was taken into custody without resistance, but officers later described him as the engine room of Rahman's operation, the man who kept the street supply running on schedule. The search of Mohammed Rahman's flat revealed the darker side of the network. Police found him inside a property that belonged to a vulnerable addict, a clear example of cuckooing. Alongside Class A drugs, officers seized a stun gun-style weapon and a phone showing messages coercing the tenant. According to investigators, Rahman's role went beyond distribution. He was responsible for recruiting and intimidating those forced to work for the gang. Across town, Jamal Ali was arrested shortly after returning from a meeting that had been under surveillance for weeks. His phone contained messages about drug drops, money transfers, and coded instructions from Rahman's number. Detectives later discovered that Ali handled the MOE line directly, sending bulk messages to users and passing updates to Rahman through encrypted devices. Anwar Ali, meanwhile, was picked up at his address in Denmark Way, found with traces of cocaine and cash linked to recent deals. He acted as a key distributor, bridging suppliers in Manchester with the street-level dealers across Oldham. By sunrise, all 5 men were in custody. Forensic teams spent the following days cataloguing evidence: drugs, cash, phones, and weapons. Every message, note, and fingerprint became another piece of the puzzle. In total, police seized £750,000 worth of heroin and cocaine, dozens of burner phones, and the financial records of a county lines network that had been quietly profiting from human misery. Operation MOE had done exactly what it set out to do: dismantle the line from top to bottom and expose the men who thought they were untouchable. In April 2025, nearly a year after the raids, the 5 men behind the MOE line finally stood before a judge at Manchester Crown Court. Months of investigation, digital forensics, and witness testimony had built a case so strong that each defendant chose to plead guilty. For prosecutors, it was a victory that showcased how meticulous police work could dismantle even the most tightly controlled county lines network. At the top of the indictment was Mohammed Rahman, 28, described by the Crown as the controller and director of operations. He admitted conspiracy to supply heroin and cocaine and possession of criminal property. The court heard how Rahman orchestrated deliveries, managed cash flow, and gave orders through encrypted phones. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison. Mohammed Rahman, 25, received 8 years for conspiracy to supply, multiple counts of possession with intent to supply, and possession of a weapon. The judge called him predatory and manipulative, citing his exploitation of vulnerable people. Jason Wakeford, 51, was sentenced to 7 years for conspiracy to supply and possession with intent. He had been responsible for logistics, the physical link between Rahman's orders and street-level trade. Jamal Ali, just 21, received 5 years for managing the communication and finances of the line, while Anwar Ali, 40, was handed 3 years and 6 months for his role in distribution. In total, the group was jailed for over 34 years. Detective Sergeant Leanne Banks, who led the investigation, said after sentencing, "This group acted without thought or feeling for the consequences of their actions. They exploited people and profited from addiction. These sentences reflect the seriousness of their crimes." With the sentencing complete, Operation MOE officially came to an end, but for detectives, social workers, and the people of Oldham, the aftermath of the gang's downfall was only just beginning. The MOE line had been one of the most significant county lines operations ever dismantled in the borough. Over the course of 6 months, it had trafficked £750,000 worth of heroin and cocaine, reaching not only Oldham but surrounding areas including Rochdale, Middleton, and Manchester. What police uncovered went far beyond drugs. They found stories of exploitation, fear, and young lives manipulated into crime. Vulnerable residents had been targeted because they were easy to control. People with addiction issues, mental health struggles, or financial hardship. Their homes became drug storage sites. Their safety was taken from them. When the raids ended, officers and safeguarding teams began the process of rehabilitation and recovery. The properties that had once served as bases for the gang were cleaned, secured, and in some cases, repurposed for community housing. Outreach programs were launched to support victims of cuckooing, ensuring that those coerced into the operation were not treated as offenders but as survivors. In statements released after sentencing, Greater Manchester Police emphasised that the investigation's success was due to close collaboration between local policing teams, the Serious and Organised Crime Group, and community members who came forward with information. A GMP spokesperson said, "This case shows that county lines activity is not just a city problem. It can happen in any community, and with the public's help, we will continue to target those who exploit others for profit." Local media echoed the sentiment. The Oldham Times called the case a wake-up call for the town, describing how an unassuming residential area had been at the center of a drug empire run from encrypted phones. The Manchester Evening News went further, labeling Rahman an out-of-depth crime boss who believed he was untouchable. Behind closed doors, investigators continued to follow up on intelligence that emerged from seized devices. Some contacts found in Rahman's phones were traced to wider supply networks operating across Greater Manchester. Those lines too are now under investigation. Community leaders have since praised the work of Operation MOE for not only dismantling a dangerous criminal group, but also exposing the human side of county lines crime. The teenagers recruited, the addicts coerced, the fear that kept people silent. For every drug deal that took place, there was a person in the background being used as collateral. The case has become a blueprint for future investigations, showing how digital evidence, community intelligence, and partnership policing can bring down organized networks. Police across the UK have since cited the MOE takedown as an example of how even seemingly small local operations can be hiding multi-100,000-pound enterprises. For Oldham, the story of the MOE line serves as both a cautionary tale and a symbol of resilience. It showed how a community under quiet siege could unite with law enforcement to reclaim its streets, proving that no criminal network, no matter how encrypted or intimidating, is ever truly untouchable. The phones were silent, the runners disappeared, and for the first time in years, the town that once hid one of Britain's most ruthless drug rings could finally breathe again.